That's great. So I'm Asaad. I'm one of the orthopedic registrars in East Kent, Surrey and Sussex hospitals. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to present this study. The title is "The Timeout, Is There Cognitive Dissonance in the Operating Theatre?" This is a picture of a real patient showing that the left knee is marked for surgery, but the letter R is written on the skin, which indicates the wrong side. This slide shows an increase in the wrong side surgery in the UK over the last few years. This is like a template from our timeout post-op instructions, and on the right-hand side there's a picture with a question about whether the skin is intact after removal of the diathermy pad, and the answer is yes. However, on the left-hand side, there is the diathermy pad that was removed 24 hours after the operation. So clearly, the question was answered without checking the skin. On the left-hand side, this is a template of the timeout checklist by the WHO. This was created in 2008 and has not been changed since 2009. On the right-hand side, this is a copy of our timeout checklist, which clearly has more questions. So the objectives of this audit is to assess our local adaptation of the WHO checklist and to audit our local checklist to check whether our questions are logical and that they are being answered correctly. Lastly, we need to check whether we can improve. This is a paragraph from the WHO guidelines defining the purpose of the checklist. So in summary, it's a final safety checklist to verify the correct patient, site, and procedure before skin incision. It's also important to note that the question about imaging is based on checking the site and not surgical planning. So the key points: it is a final safety check. A bulky timeout checklist can have safety implication and can lead to checklist fatigue. We should have a checklist which is concise, brief, and meaningful, and valuable for each team member's role. This slide is just to highlight that any checklist modifications should be a joint collaboration between surgeons, anesthetists, and nurses, as per the WHO recommendations. So this is a comparison between the WHO recommended checklist and our local checklist. It's recommended to have 5 to 9 questions, but in our hospital we have 19 questions. The recommendation is that the checklist should be brief and should not take more than a minute. In our audit, it took about 1.5 to 2 minutes on average. The questions should be actionable. In our case, only half of them were actionable. This is a copy of our local timeout checklist. It has many questions that are not actionable, and you can only answer yes. There's no options of saying no, for example. So these are our observations. We had too many questions, 19 versus 9. It took over a minute to complete. Most of the questions were not actionable, and they mostly had one answer. You cannot say no. These are our audit methods. The first part, we collected and analyzed 33 completed timeout checklists over a period of 3 weeks in the trauma settings. And the second part, we distributed survey questions to 76 theatre staff, and we analyzed their answers. So each survey has 7 questions. The 2 core questions are based on surgical marking and whether imaging and the imaging available question. This is an example of some of the questions that were asked. So we collected the data from, as we said, 76 theater staff with different grades and roles, including surgeons, nurses, and ODPs. We asked the staff in what proportion of cases were you able to clearly see the site marking after the drapes has been applied. And around 75% answered that they were not able to see the site marking after draping. Now, although 75% were unable to see the site marking, it was documented that the site marking was visible in all completed timeout checklists that we analyzed. This is one of the survey questions. When would people record yes when asked, is the site mark visible? The answers clearly show that there is different understanding of the question. More importantly, there is 20 out of 76 people who would answer yes to the question based on other team members seeing the mark prior to draping. And this is an example of potential human factor error. Again, this is another survey question, and the answers show that people have different interpretations to these questions. These are some of the other findings that we noted. Many questions are always answered the same. So are these questions valuable, or should some of them be removed? There was an incident where there was a discrepancy between the site confirmed by the surgeon and the scrub practitioner, and there was no documented actions. So we also asked, how valuable do you find the current timeout checklist for ensuring patient safety? The consultant surgeons gave a score of 6.38 out of 10, and that was followed by the anesthetist of 6.65. So clearly the surgeons and the anesthetists are not satisfied with the safety of this checklist. These are some additional survey comments. People recommended having simpler and fewer questions, minimal checklist, or else becomes routine without any value. Some questions were not understood and were interpreted differently by the theatre staff, and the checklist was taking longer than it should do. So what changes can we make? I think it would be important to look into our checklist regularly and remove the questions that are not actionable or changeable, or the ones that are always answered the same, or any answer that does not help the clinical team and just increase the time of the checklist. Also, wording should be thoroughly checked to ensure the questions do not create confusion. We should raise awareness and present this as we did in our governance meeting, and continue to monitor our progress. And thank you very much.